Well, in a moment, we'll hear from Jonathan Powell, who signed off the first letters and, of course, was the chief British negotiator in Northern Ireland under Tony Blair. But first, David Ford, the Justice Minister at Stormont and leader of the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland, and Jerry Kelly from Sinn Féin are both with us from Belfast. Thank you both for being here. David Ford, firstly to you, how did you not know about this? Peter Hain says that suggestion is risible.
Well, Peter Hain can say what he likes. But the simple fact is that Peter Hain standing up in the House of Commons and saying we have to address the issue of the OTRs is not an explanation of what Peter Hain then did. Of course, we all knew that the issue had to be addressed, but it should have been addressed in an open, transparent and accountable way. And that's absolutely what didn't happen.
So what did you think was actually happening with these people then? You knew the issue was being taken in hand. What did you think was going on?
No, we didn't know it was being taken in hand. We knew that people were saying it needed to be addressed. There were quite clear ways in which it could have been addressed in parallel, for example, to the early releases under the Good Friday Agreement, which people accepted and voted for in the Good Friday referendum. But we simply had no knowledge of what was being done by the government and Sinn Féin.
What should happen with these letters now then? Because Peter Robinson threatened to resign, saying not just there should be an inquiry, but also that the letters should be torn up. He now appears to be happy, but should the letters still be torn up, rescinded? What do you want?
Well, I'm not sure what the legalities of rescinding would be, but certainly, I mean, you've highlighted the fact that Peter Robinson demanded that the letters be rescinded. He now appears to have settled for something which is simply that the letters will be restated, which is very short of his demand. I certainly agreed with many other people that we had got into such a mess that an independent inquiry was needed. But exactly what can be done, I'm not sure. And certainly some of the wilder unionist demands about listing names is almost certainly a breach of our obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights in terms of right to private life, even right to life.
Jerry Kelly, do you understand why some people in unionist communities are furious about this and feel that somehow a deal was done between Sinn Féin and the British government behind closed doors?
Well, let me try and deal with this behind closed door stuff. As David is only after saying, this was known. Not only was it known, it was probably one of the most discussed issues throughout the last number of years.
But if that's the case, why do so many senior unionists feel they knew nothing?
Well, let me just say this, because all the evidence has come out today. This was not only raised publicly in 2001 by the British Prime Minister saying that he would sort out the issue of on the runs. It was then raised on a number of occasions on 2007 in the policing board, where both, I presume, Alliance and certainly DUP members were present. Again in 2010 at the policing board, where there was a report given on the scheme at that stage. And in the Eames-Bradley report on the past in 2009, it actually said that there was 200 people who were in this process and that 150 of them had been dealt with. Now, what they didn't know was the private letter between the British authorities and the person who had asked to find out if they were being sought. And let's be very clear about this, because people are talking about all of these over 180 people as if they were convicted and tried. The vast bulk of them are people who,
what will happen now to these?
But listen, but they were being told. They were actually being told that they weren't looking for them.
Well, we know that they were told that then. But what happens now under this inquiry? What will you do if there are people who are on those lists who are told there is evidence and they could be prosecuted?
Well, I can give my opinion, and I've seen what the statement of the British Prime Minister. In my opinion, it is unnecessary. It is a fig leaf, a political fig leaf, to allow the DUP to get out of the spot that they put themselves into, the hole that they dug, and if that's what it's there for, then that's fair enough. But in actual fact, for Peter Robinson to say that these letters aren't worth the paper they're written on, surely that runs against logic. If in fact the whole furore arose from the fact that there is a letter there is a letter which a court of law in the last few days has said
Jerry Kelly, if there are arrests now, but Jerry Kelly, if arrests come out of this inquiry, what impact will that have? Will Sinn Féin cooperate? What will happen?
Nobody has mentioned any arrests. I don't expect there to be any arrests, and indeed what they have said is they want to find out if there are any other mistakes made. That is an entirely different thing from what Peter Robinson is claiming.
Okay, Jerry Kelly and David Ford, thank you for being with us. Jonathan Powell, to you, there's a massive miscommunication, misunderstanding between these two communities. You've said this was an administrative error, but do you accept that the unionists feel absolutely they were shut out here, they were excluded, something was cooked up behind closed doors?
No, there's been an extraordinary muddle between two very different issues. The issue of on the runs is an issue that rises in nearly all peace agreements and came up after the Good Friday Agreement. In 2001, at Western Park negotiations, the British and Irish governments wrote to all the party leaders and said they wished to resolve the issue of on the runs. We then negotiated the issue for the rest of our time in government from 2001 to 2007, but we never reached an agreement. We were unable to find a comprehensive agreement to the issue of on the runs. Now people are muddling this issue of was there some sort of deal on the runs with a series of administrative letters which were to people who were not wanted. People who asked if they would be wanted, was there any evidence against them? They were sent individual letters saying that they weren't wanted. This is not an amnesty, it's not a secret deal, it wasn't a deal at all, it was a series of letters.
But there was a system that was set up, a series of letters, but it was a system that was set up to deal with this. Can we have any confidence that there weren't other mistakes? Has been this one now appalling botch we know about, can you be sure there weren't others?
Yes, again, people are muddling different things together here. The case was dropped, as I understand it, by the judge because the police made a mistake in dealing with this letter. Instead of checking with the Metropolitan Police whether this man was wanted or not wanted, they failed to do so. They issued him a letter saying he wasn't wanted when the Metropolitan Police did want him.
But
so
can
this
you
was
be sure there weren't other similar mistakes that could have similar consequences?
I note that the inquiry that's been announced by the Prime Minister is very narrowly drawn. It's drawn to deal only with the issue of whether there were other mistakes made. In other words, your earlier question about could there be further arrests, I don't see how that could possibly happen. They're simply looking at these letters to see if there are other mistakes in those letters.
Except that a system was set up here, mistakes were made, the unionists feel completely furious about it. The way that this has all happened has surely damaged the trust that was so critical to the progress of this whole process.
Well, I think if the price of keeping the government going was to have an inquiry, that was a sensible thing for David Cameron to do. But I think there's a certain amount of ersatz to this fury. If you actually look back at the parliamentary question answered by John Reid in 2002, he mentioned this process, he talked about the number of people who had been dealt with at that stage. It was covered again in subsequent publications later. It would have to be a very unobservant politician who didn't know this was happening.
Do you think then, are you saying the unionists are bluffing somehow?
No, we're approaching May elections and people are trying to cast blame around and blame each other for things. I hope they will now go back to running Northern Ireland and the success that the Good Friday Agreement has been in bringing peace to Northern Ireland.
But it's interesting, you were saying they'd have to be fairly unobservant not to have known what's going on. I mean, that's suggesting either they were deliberately looking the other way or they didn't want to know.
Well, you'd have to ask them why they didn't notice these things. All I say is this was not some sort of secret. It was out there in the public domain. They could have seen it.
OK, Jonathan Powell, thank you very much indeed for coming in.